we will move to the main part of our service. So when Katie gives me the thumbs up, all right, we are live. So welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tullahoma. It's Sunday, May 23rd, 2021. And welcome to those of you here on Zoom. Welcome to those of you viewing this through the live stream on YouTube. And welcome to those of you who are viewing this on a recording. We will now start with the chalice lighting, and Cass will read while I light the chalice.
This comes from the Unitarian Universalist website by Amy Brooks. We light this chalice to kindle a flame of warmth as a reminder of the connection that draws us into a community that opens us up in gratitude for the breath in our lungs and the love in our hearts, and for the gift of this day and being alive.
We'll now go to announcements. And for those of you who want to or like to support the work of the church, we can send a check to our treasurer at P.O. Box 331 in Tullahoma, 37388. Other announcements. So I think Ricky started the therapeutic writing class on Tuesday evening, and I believe that's weekly. He's not here, but I'm not 100% sure about that. But Bob's, yeah, okay. So if you're interested in that, contact Ricky to get an email if you're not getting it for the Zoom link. So that's Tuesday nights.
At 7.
At 7? Okay, there we go. Thank you, Chuck.
And at least this week, it was exactly 1 hour. Unlike the Thursday night discussion group that goes for a very, very long hour.
Yeah, I think Ricky's planning on this thing to have a beginning of an end. It's supposed to be 10
weeks, I
10
think.
sessions. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, anyone's welcome.
Other announcements. Yeah, Chuck.
And then to segue, the Thursday night discussion group will be meeting on Thursday night. Imagine that, at 7 o'clock via Zoom. And if we get together and use watching TED Talk as an excuse to just gab. Pretty much, to be honest. But if anybody's interested in joining us, just let us know, me or Tom or Rick, or Peter, we'll send you a link, or Tony.
Yes. Jane, you had your hand up?
You're muted, Jane. There you go.
You're muted. Try again.
I'm heading to New Mexico for a week this next Friday, so nobody's going to check on me anyway, but I won't be here next Sunday.
All right.
I'll be eating good food in New Mexico.
Thanks for letting us know. And enjoy your trip.
Thanks.
Are you flying or driving?
I'm going to fly. I'm going to spend my time eating in every restaurant that I used to like. So I'm going to weigh about 200 pounds when I get back. I'll fill up my screen.
Can't find any wash.
Another announcement. Board members can film.
Like a dish pan?
Yes.
All right, where do we go? There we go. Is that the annual meeting of the church will be on June 27th. I believe that's the last Sunday in June. And at that meeting, the board will be elected. There'll be an election of officers. All the officers serve 1-year terms except for the trustee, and that is Peter. That's a 3-year term. And I think the budget's also approved at that meeting. So that will be coming up. And there'll be information, yeah, Chuck, there'll be information coming out from the president or the board on that.
And you just reminded me, Carrie knows this, on June 27th is the last day of General Assembly, and they're streaming the Sunday service from General Assembly It's actually at 11 o'clock our time. So you can ask Carrie, we might or might not do something like, why do that instead of talkback or something. And I don't know how that'll go with the congregational meeting, but just something to think about.
Thank you for that information. Yeah. Other announcements? Carrie.
Yeah, I was going to mention that, Chuck. Thanks for reminding me. I didn't realize we were going to be having a congregational meeting then, so that really does kind of put a kink in things.
Well, depending on the timing, the congregational meeting might take all of 5 or 10 minutes. And
that's true.
Right at the end, if we manage to wrap the service up a few minutes early, we can do it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to think about that. Ricky brought up yesterday that we would probably have to watch it individually, since if we had one person having it on their screen, there would be a big lag time for everybody else.
I'm not sure that's necessarily true. I would think that as long as it's somebody with good bandwidth, with a fast internet connection, that we could meet via Zoom and just have one person share screen of the screen or something.
So let's work out those details offline.
We need to do that.
Yes.
Another thing, next Sunday, Doug will be speaking, and the title is "You Are Worth More Than You Realize, More Than You Know." So I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you. Tom has his hand up. An announcement, Tom?
Yeah. Let me reiterate, we're going to go meet at King's for lunch. Peter, you just came in late, I think, relative to when we mentioned that. And anybody wants to join us, please do. At 12:15 or so, something like that.
Tell me where King's is. What King's
used to be Ming's.
Used to be Ming's.
Oh, okay. I know that one.
Next to a bank, I guess, and the gym at the front. I don't know where it is right now, but Raphael's is right next door now. It's right there. Okay. Anyway, we meet and go forever and have fun. Leave when we can.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Other announcements? It looks like that's it for announcements. So we will now do our reading, and after the reading, we will go to our speaker. This reading comes from the UU website. It's by Jay Atkinson. Some of us are struggling with sorrow or grief, but are afraid to reach out for help. Some of us are sick of ourselves and of others, but don't know what to do about it. Some of us just want to be ourselves, but it seems that other people won't let us. Some of us want to make the world a better place, but feel overwhelmed by the forces of inertia and self-interest. Some of us aren't sure what we need, but hope we can find it here. We gather in this community, sometimes in fear, sometimes in trust, sometimes in pain, sometimes in joy, but always in hope that we can support and strengthen one another in our common quest for healing and wholeness. So now we go to our speaker. Kellye Gilbert is the director of the Haven of Hope, and I will ask Kellye to share a little bit first about the mission of, or maybe that's part of her talk, is the mission of Haven of Hope, and then the title of her talk. So Kellye, it's all yours.
Hi, good morning. I hope you can hear me good. If not, please let me know and I'll try to maneuver that around. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to join in with you guys. I enjoyed it when we got to do it in person. It seems like forever ago now for all of us. So I appreciate the opportunity to still be here today. So I am the director of the Haven of Hope, and while most of you may be familiar, I'll just kind of recap that, and then we'll kind of move into the other, because I know we titled this Before and Beyond Physical Abuse. So when Carrie had reached out, we were talking about some different things that maybe we not recognize as domestic violence, but we are a domestic violence and sexual violence victims advocacy program. And so I'm like, I'll we run our 24-hour crisis hotline, so folks who are in need can reach out at any time of day or night and get a hold of an advocate. We also have our emergency shelter for those who are in imminent danger. And then some of the things that sometimes folks don't always know that we do. We serve actually 6 counties here in this area, so Bedford, Coffee, Franklin, Lincoln, Marshall, and more. And we have outreach offices in those counties as well. So folks can come in and speak to an advocate if they'd rather meet somebody in person or talk to them. Then they have that option. And that's where we meet and serve a lot of the clients that we see. They get a chance to just come in and talk to somebody. And it's just to share maybe for the first time what's been going on and find out what their options and rights are. We talk a lot about safety. We talk a lot about resources in the community and helping them build a plan for what that looks like for them, to whether that's in leaving, whether that's how that works for them, and then all those extras. And so of course we've been open throughout the whole pandemic, and that's been an interesting thing, like it has been for all of us. But we've also seen where a lot of folks are scared about leaving because that is an unknown. And so helping folks navigate what that looks like in our judicial system when they need those kinds of resources and help as well, because that was ever changing. Even when some of the buildings that our offices are in were closed, we still got to serve folks, even if we met them outside in a gazebo. And that was important to be able to still be available to folks. And so, like part of what we do is help people navigate if they're having to walk through the criminal justice system. We're not attorneys, we're advocates for victims, where the state has the state's interest at heart, and they do things well for the victims, but this is just so extra set of eyes and ears and support walking through that system. And then also through the civil, if they choose or need to petition for an order of protection and those kinds of things. And so then, of course, we get to do these community education pieces where you guys let me come talk today. Our group support system has been a little different this year. Not everybody has access and able to do Zoom, and conference calls weren't very conducive. So that's been a little slower. So we've done a lot more individual work with folks, and we're tickled to have done it, but it definitely changed our dynamics for sure. And then, of course, we didn't get to do as much medical accompaniment this year based on, not being able to go into hospital settings and stuff with folks. So as things open back up, it's one of those looking into be able to do some of those things that we did before. But we were able to provide phone advocacy even in those situations. But when Kellye and I reached out and talked about me getting to come and spend time with you guys today and share, we talked about, a lot of times when we think about when somebody says domestic violence, you have some very real thoughts behind that a lot of times. And usually you think about physical abuse, and we think about some verbal abuse, and, you might even think about some financial abuse and some different things like that. But you have some very, very real things. Some of the things that we don't always think about is when you're looking at the main dynamic of power, of domestic and sexual law, is power and control. And so one of those things that we don't, it's not something we visibly see when we're talking to folks and we're interacting with individuals, we may not see. And that's that coercive kind of control that's kind of back behind. And that's why when I named it Before and Beyond, because a lot of times these coercive control I guess tactics is a good way to go about it. But these things are happening a lot of times before physical abuse starts. And sometimes physical abuse may never happen, but these things are a dynamic that are running through, and they're part of that cycle of abuse. And so I just wanted to kind of go over a few of those just to kind of broaden our horizons on what that looks like. And I think it also helps us to keep us in check that sometimes we have behaviors that we're going, that's probably not the healthiest behavior I may have. And so I think it's good to share those kinds of things. But it's kind of that it is the control. It becomes oppressive, but sometimes it can sneak in really without knowing it. Even to as a victim survivor, we may not see how that catches a bond to us. So one of the other things that makes this a little more interesting is here in the U.S., these behaviors aren't actually illegal. It's not a crime that you can go and report necessarily. But a lot of times it uses some different, it's oppressive behavior within that relationship and that dynamic. And so it's something any of us can experience, and it's grounded in a lot of times in some of our patriarchal roles, and using those kinds of norms and traditions almost against a person. And so one of the, I've kind of got like 12 of them, and y'all can stop me if I'm doing too much, okay? But kind of one of the first one is isolating from support systems. That's where, trying to cut people off from friends, from family, limiting contact, so they don't receive that outside support. So the only support they have is their maybe their abusive partner. And I'm using that term as abusive, even though we've talked about this may not be the physical abuse, but this controlling behavior. And so we're talking about sharing. It may even be doing simple things that seem really, really innocent and inoculant would be, sharing a phone or sharing social media accounts, because that's just convenient and that's easier. And we're a couple. And so, hey, that wouldn't be a big deal, right? Even moving folks far away from family and friends. So visiting isn't as easy to do, those kinds of thing. And then sometimes it is just downright lying about other people. Oh, well, they said this. Monitoring all of a person's phone calls, and even kind of cutting off phone lines or cutting things off in case there's some sort of intervention trying to happen. I mean, these are things that escalate as time too. Again, they seem really, really innocent, but how are they being used, in the long run, that kind of thing. And then sometimes even where if there's a relationship with the family, convincing that the family doesn't like them, or spreading things. Oh, they're this or that, and getting where, well, she really didn't want to come and spending time. And I try not to use she and he indiscriminately, because we know that abuse happens in all spectrums. But, going, well, they didn't really want to come and visit with you guys. We're going to go to my family instead, and building some of that, and building a wedge within some of those, or they really don't want to spend time with you, even though that may not be the truth, but those kinds of things. So it builds some of that animosity and further isolates the person. One of the other things that you can look at is monitoring activities throughout the day. And I think that is, that's a big deal now. We have so many technologies that are really easy to set up and put in our homes, and, having a ring. And these are great things for safety and security within in the exteriors of our homes, but then we use them inside our homes. Well, this is a really great way for a controlling partner to be able to make themselves very invasive. Maybe having cameras all over the house or recording devices, and you can easily, play that off as a good use for that funds, right? So, and those are attempts to make themselves, it's almost like an omnipresent, all of these kinds of things, doing those extra, keeping trackers on phones or however that may be, and even escalating to the point where they can speak, like, there's even those two-way cameras that I can see what you're doing and I can speak to you from wherever I may be. All that added element of control, but it also is to remind I'm always watching you. And think about that. I mean, that is a really how that affects us, and it kind of pulls back into denying, our third thing would be denying our freedoms and autonomy. I mean, if you feel like you're always being watched and those kinds of things, that's, that freedom of movement, that independence, that just being able to relax, think about how on guard you are. And so, this is a controlling tactic as well, because it does limit that freedom. And then even more so, maybe it's not allowing somebody to go to work or not allowing somebody to go to school, restricting access to transportation. So maybe they take the car keys. And it could be simple to start with, I accidentally grabbed the keys to both vehicles as I left this morning. Or not allow, and then it gets even to the point where, well, no, you can only use the car on these purposes for when I say not anything else. And that's very real. And then even going to the point where stalking. So if that victim survivor is allowed to leave, maybe they literally follow them everywhere they go, or have a tracker on their phone and keep up. So when they come out, well, where did you go? Well, actually, it showed me at 12:02 you went to. So what were you doing there? And then some of those other things, some of those simple things, taking that phone or going through accounts and changing all the passwords, those kinds of things. Again, taking away those freedoms and that independence. Well, let me take care of that for you. While on the surface can look like they want to help and be taking care of that, but then there's the point where it's a control and not a help, right? And you guys can pop in. I can't see everything on things, but if you have questions or thoughts, I'm not opposed to taking those as we go. So the fourth kind of thing is gaslighting. And this is kind of more of an interesting, this is where that abuser always wants to be right. And even forcing a victim survivor to acknowledge that. It's with manipulations, lies, kind of convince the victim that they're wrong. And trying to think of one of those things that like an example to kind of give you an idea what that gaslighting looks like. The abuser may come home from work expecting dinner. And when they left that morning said, I'd really like steak before they left. So the victim knows that, okay, well, dinner's expected. I'm going to work on getting that done. So when served dinner, the abuser may be like, throw a fit, maybe even to the extreme of throwing it on the floor and screaming and yelling about, no, I wanted burgers. I told you that. When you stupid to follow directions. And even if they do it in a nice manner, going, well, I asked you for burgers this morning. Why are you feeding me steak or whatever? And simple terms of that. So to the point that your victim is like, well, maybe I did miss those. My memory gone. Apologizing, trying to remake a dinner. I'm like, it throws that back on, and I'm like, even though that's not what happened, it starts making them question. And so that's kind of what gaslighting is. Of course, going down the list, like name calling, putting folks down, malicious, frequent criticisms, that bullying kind of behavior. And then especially in front of others. And so kind of, make somebody feel unimportant, deficient. Again, you kind of get beat down way before you get beat up. That kind of mentality is to make somebody feel like they're not worth anything. And those kinds of things kind of falls right in line with that. Some of the other things, controlling taxes, controlling finances, limiting access to money within the household, and the ability to. And so again, if you think about that, if you're restricting money, if you're trying to leave a situation, I think I've spoke on this before. We've talked about how expensive it is, even in affordable housing when you can find it. You're still looking at all the deposits and those kinds of things. So even if there's equal income coming in, or both parties may be working, but the access to those funds is very limited. Placing really strict budgets that barely cover essentials, given very minute amount of money to cover groceries that need to be, and then having things like steak on that request, and only $50 a week in groceries. Not very practical, but limits those kinds of things, and maybe even hiding some of those financial resources. Not allowing having credit cards or debit cards, those kinds of things, and really, really monitoring every dime that's spent, and having to have receipts. I mean, I've worked with a client who literally every time they spent anything, there had to be a receipt back showing where it was spent. And so, that kind of thing that does really change somebody's freedom and autonomy when they don't have access to funds. One of the, like, number 7, I guess, if you're taking that number down, where we're talking a little bit earlier about reinforcing traditional gender roles, and not even worrying about like the relationships that they have, but trying to justify women as homemakers and mothers, and even in all types of relationships, still having those kind of labeled gender roles. Men are the breadwinners, and so, but you also using that argument that, well, we're designating that for you, so you should take care of all the cleaning, all the cooking, all the child care. If children are these are your roles, these are mine. And not having a flow and an open communication kind of thing, but setting, this is what you should do, and where somebody can, again, controlling, well, this really needs to be done, and you're the one who's supposed to be doing it, those kinds of things. And then one of the other things is turning kids against victims and stuff like that. And this is, again, if they have children, but sometimes, and it can be within mutual friendships outside of that too, but trying to get them on their side. If you have, if they have children together, or if there's a children maybe from a previous relationship, and it's almost like trying to weaponize the children against them, telling them that they're a bad parent, that kind of thing, or belittling that victim in front of the children. So that level of authority and respect, and again, taking away some of that autonomy and that equality that should be in that relationship away, and using the children against them. And then, of course, sometimes we can see that not only, and some of those attitudes create rifts between the parent-child relationship as well. And so then you look, and that again, taking away that power as maybe another adult in that household, but also if that victim is looking at trying to leave, now their children may, and worried about leaving their children in that situation, but the children may not be on board of leaving because they don't have that respect and care for the other parent in that. Another one of these coercive controlling behaviors is controlling aspects of the victim's health and body. So monitor, control even how much they eat, how much they sleep, how much time they spend in the bathroom. Maybe sometimes it can be as extreme as requiring to count calories, strict exercise regimen, and even to the point of controlling with medications, or if they're allowed to go to the doctor and whether or not they're allowed to go for medical care, what is deemed. It's one of these kinds of things where you've put the victim always feeling like that they're walking on eggshells, and that their body is no longer their own. Taking away that control of ourselves. And then some of these others, another controlling tactic is making jealous accusations all the time. Complain about the amount of time they spend with family or friends, both on and offline, that kind of thing. And again, it's trying to isolate down. Some of these all interconnect. I'm sure you've seen some of that too. But again, that minimizing that contact with the outside world, it's also an effect to try to make them feel guilty that they're not spending enough time with. And again, that also breaks down, that opens the door for, again, isolating folks further. It may even be a reason why they shouldn't continue working because they are too close to their coworkers, even though there's admittedly nothing going on, but that's that tactic in use. Well, they're going to use those jealous accusations to go, well, you shouldn't be working there, or you shouldn't be going to school or in that class, or going to, and I'm like, it could even be, not going to that worship service, not joining in these things throughout their life. Again, other coercive controls, and that's kind of regulating a sexual relationship. Talking about demanding, amounts of times and activities that are performed in that, and using guilt and triggers to demand things that they want, and even to the point of whether it's reproductive control, whether to use or not to use, birth control or those kinds of things, or even purposely trying to get a victim pregnant. And that scenario is we see that as well, to help tie them to, and even to the point of where asking them to take pictures and send. And we know that once a picture's out there in the media today, that can be used against a victim survivor as well. Once that's out of your control, that's out of your control. One of those things we really want to talk to our youth and about, because sometimes, as adults, we kind of get that, but sometimes we forget how easy that anything that is put out there stays out there now in our digital world. And that can come back and be used against somebody. But part of that is that victims come to understand that if they don't comply with the demands and desires, then there's going to be some significant consequences. And again, it may be, I can't use if I say no here, maybe I can't use the vehicle to go to work or school. Or if I say no here, then I'm not going to get the funds I need for us to pay the light bill or to get groceries or whatever kind of thing. And then kind of the escalation of all these controlling tactics is it does come down to starting threatening, whether it be the victim or survivor, but threatening outside of that, threatening the children, threatening pets. Again, all of these things combined, the physical, emotional, financial threats, will make those threats first. And if it doesn't, get the desired result, then they may escalate those threats to other folks in an attempt to be controlling. So threatening you doesn't work, so let me try threatening the children, or if you have your four-legged children, those are still near and dear to us. I'm like, we don't want to see them hurt. So again, using those kinds of things to control and to send, and then knowing that if you're not compliant, then you've put those other folks in your life that you care about, in danger. And even sometimes it's like, well, they threaten to call DCS or social services that you're not taking care of the children or things well, doing intimidation tactics about important decisions and trying to undermine that. And then we even get down to we're threatening to kidnap, children and take them or taking the pet off away or those kinds of things. Those are very real things that happen. And that's what's really hard is we think about all these things that if, just picture yourself having to live in that situation and how oppressive it would be. And then you stop and you realize, and then you're trying to figure out how to get help, how to leave, how to do these things, knowing this is toxic and not in a place you want to be, but none of it's technically illegal. The threats kind of do escalate a bit more into the illegal side, but it's something really hard to prove or do anything, or to have somebody stamp and go, here, this is a criminal charge and that kind of thing, right? And so that's why I think it is a really unspoken thing that we don't talk about because we don't see it on the outside looking in at folks. But it is so hard because it truly entraps. And as that escalates through that cycle of violence and that we talked about in the past, it does. It creates and traps them in and even creates like a hostage-like situation if you think about it because, regardless of the history, and there's going to be happy times and it's like, but you also recognize this isn't healthy and it's not okay. And so that can be very, very complex to get out. And even more so in these kinds of things. So I know, I just feel like I was like, blah, all that out there. So I'm not sure how you guys want to do that, but I'm more than willing to answer questions. And if there's some other things about regular things that we do, I'm all for answering or listening or doing, but I know sometimes we do a talk back thing too. So I don't want to take up more time and do it differently.
So yeah, normally what we do for questions and comments is during talkback. So let's save it for that. So if you have more to present, that's great. Otherwise, we'll take a break now and then come back in 10 minutes for talkback. It's
okay.
Up to you.
Kellye, could you talk a little bit about the repercussions legally of reporting? I know that I've heard about times when well, I'm not really sure right now how to word it.
So
that's okay.
So yeah, well, that's okay, and we can talk a little about this. So when somebody is dealing with this kind of coercive, controlling behavior, and we see and recognize that as abuse, right? While our law enforcement and our judicial system may not see a lot of this as abuse, and we can't tag it as an assault or those kinds of things to go through that, these kinds of things still can be used within the confines of an order of protection. And it's civil and it's different. The threats and stuff can kind of get on to harassments, and threats can be, and I'll say it's hard because you need proof of those things for that to be a criminal charge, but those do escalate to that level to be considered still a misdemeanor, and still pretty low key on the justice side of that. But those do kind of get up to that level. But that's one out of the 12 things we just talked about that are actually something that you could go and call and, call the police and make a report on. But, you can use some of these things because it is an abuse. And those threats do, I don't want to say help, but they do support, like if somebody needs an order of protection. So yeah, these are really difficult to walk through because there's not a lot, there's not anything for the district attorney to take and try to prosecute when you're looking at some of these simple behaviors. And I don't know if you go through it, if you think about some of those examples I gave you, sometimes even in healthy relationships, we can throw a little guilt on and use some of those manipulative tactics, right? I've been getting to share with some of our youth in Tullahoma at the middle schools, and we talk about the healthy relationships and things that we're all capable of some of these behaviors. It's about, are we using them to control other folks in our lives? And so it comes down to where we have to make those decisions to how our behavior and how we react. Because yeah, these are some of those difficult cases where it's about helping somebody make a plan of what that looks like getting out, because there isn't a lot, there's not, we can get the police to come and arrest anybody. And so it is a longer, harder, I might say it's all difficult. I'm just going to say it that way. But yeah, there's different parameters in place when there is physical abuse and blatant things like that are legal versus these controlling tactics that we see as unhealthy and toxic and are very hard on victims and survivors and children within these relationships, especially in a mental health capacity, how difficult it is to live in that kind of, I mean, short of anything like a terrorist kind of hostage situation, right? And so how that affects us on a health scale and a mental health scale. And of course, you know, all of that leads into physical health as well, but it's not something you can pinpoint and have arrested for sure. So hopefully that kind of answered what you were going there.
All right. Yeah, thank you. So you feel you're complete now with your presentation?
I do.
All right. So we will do our closing, and then we'll take a 10-minute break. So right now I'll bring up a share screen for the closing.
And I will tell you, this is the piece I wanted to play last week, and it will be Unitarian Universalist Church of Los Alamos, who is serenading us today with our ending song.
As we leave this friendly place, love give light to every face. May the kindness which we learn light our hearts till we return.
All right, so it is now 10:53 on my clock. So let's take a 10-minute break, come back at 3 minutes after 11 for Talkback. And thank you very much, Kellye. Really appreciated that. That was very insightful, and you brought up a lot of points that, just brought it home and pointed out things that are causing problems that most of us aren't aware of. So thank you much. So see you folks in 10